welcome. This is Sherry Bevan from The Confident Mother, and welcome to the 10-day LinkedIn challenge. So before we get started with the tasks for real, I thought it would be really useful to speak to a recruiter who uses LinkedIn in her work every day, so that you know that it's not just me that's banging on about the importance of what your LinkedIn profile looks like, what to include, what not to include. So I'm very delighted to invite Amanda Reuben from BG Recruitment today to talk to us about LinkedIn from the recruiter's perspective. So Amanda, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So Amanda, I guess the first question to ask you is, you know, as a recruiter, how often would you go and check somebody's profile on LinkedIn once you've got their CV or once you've talked to them on the telephone?
It's the first thing I do, Sherry. Absolutely the first thing I do. I've looked at a CV and the next thing I do is click on LinkedIn and look at their profile.
And so when you look at their profile, what are the sorts of things you're looking for? What are the things you're going to think, oh yes, this person is a good person? What are the key things you're expecting to see?
So key things for me are a good, authentic picture, a very obvious and concise work history that runs in order, that doesn't have any typos or grammatical mistakes, because I just think things like that are a real indicator of how attention to detail, for example. What I actually look for is maybe a little bit of personality. It's not so much as what is written as to how it's written, and especially, and this is for me key, the profile, and it's the same on a CV, that the way that someone describes themselves and the way they talk about their current situation, the words that they use, gives me an insight into their personality. And I think LinkedIn allows you to do that, whereas maybe a CV doesn't so much, because a CV has to be slightly more professional in its presentation.
Now, one question that just occurs to me there, obviously your CV, when you've submitted it, it's, you know, typically you would adjust it slightly depending on what particular role you were applying for, whereas your LinkedIn profile is more static in that sense.
Yes, yes.
How do you judge whether or not a CV is completely different to what you're seeing on the LinkedIn? I mean, how do you balance those two? Because they might be slightly different.
Sometimes they are, because people, I often find, update their CVs more than their LinkedIn profiles and vice versa. But I think a good, sensible recruiter will be able to pull out the things that they need from both the CV and the LinkedIn profile. But my advice to any job hunter is just to keep both up to date. The LinkedIn profile tends to be a much more generic overview of who they are and what they've done, whereas the CV is, you know, a very much up-to-date record of their work history.
Exactly. And the sorts of things that you see on LinkedIn, you think, oh my goodness, I wish she hadn't put that on there. What are the mistakes, the kind of the red flags that we might have on our LinkedIn profile?
That's a really good question. And I think, like most things, you can sort of look at it 10 times and never quite see those mistakes. So things that I would expect not to see are, as I said before, punctuation, grammatical typos. I think people need to be really mindful of the dates of their work history, and often you see some crossover. I personally, and this is a really personal thing, I don't think it's necessary to have, often people put a little logo or emblem or brand of the business they work with next to their the explanation. I don't think that's necessary, but that, again, that's very personal. I think pictures of where, and often you see there's someone, the picture they put, there may be someone else in the picture and they've kind of tried to ease that person out. That doesn't work for me at all. I think it should be professional, but I think it should be always a smile, because I think that's really important, and that tells you something about that person. Black and white or color doesn't really matter, but you know, not in an evening dress and not in a, you know, especially a lady in some glamorous outfit. I think it's got to be semi-professional, but authentic, and that's the key for me.
And that's the thing that's coming out from you actually in this, is the authenticity is super important, and obviously some of that is going to come out on your CV as well. And I guess in some ways, looking at the LinkedIn profile and the CV, you're going to get that confirmation or reconfirmation that this person is being authentic about their knowledge, their experience, their work history.
Yes, authentic, and I think real, in a true and honest sense. just the way that I work, I think, as I said before, a lot of what I do is instinctive. So I can tell very quickly from a CV whether I believe or whether that person is credible. Yeah, I think I want to be able to almost see behind what I'm looking at and know that's genuine.
Yeah, that makes sense. And any other kind of top tips from a recruiter's perspective on what not to put on your CV, or on your LinkedIn profile, sorry?
I don't think it's necessary to put any highly personal details. I don't think date of birth is important. University education, if you've done something that's really relevant to your work history, then yes, why not? Memberships I don't think are important. What else do I think is important? I made a couple of notes actually. I've found my glasses. Sorry, one thing that we've missed out, which is absolutely essential, is a lot of people don't or forget to put if they're available at the moment. And this, again, for me is absolutely crucial, because as a recruiter, one thing I do is a lot of headhunting and searching using LinkedIn. And if I'm looking for, let's say, a buyer for a particular brand, when I get a list, the list where the person that says I'm currently available or I'm looking for new opportunities, that's going to be the person that I connect with. And often I will also connect with people or send an email to people that don't say that they're available, but they will turn out to be. And so for me, that's an absolute obvious thing to do. If you're available, make people know that you're available, because
To make it obvious.
Make it obvious, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And have you got any tips on how to make it obvious when you don't want your employer to know that it's obvious?
That's a really, really good question. And I think the answer is no, you've got to be really careful about things like that. You can't say I'm available or currently looking for my next opportunity. And I think that's also why a lot of people don't necessarily connect with recruiters on LinkedIn, because depending how your settings are, and this is another thing that I think people need to be thinking about, is who they want, what they want to be seen as, whether they want to be anonymous, and how they want to come across to other people. Because if you're seen to be connecting with a recruiter and your profile is open to everybody, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit.
Yes, and that's one of the things we're going to cover in the challenge. And I think if you have that ongoing relationship with recruiters, I mean, for me, when I was working at my law firm, that was easy to do because I was in the role of being the recruiting manager. So it was easy for me to maintain relationships with recruiters without making it obvious if I was looking for new opportunities. But of course, that's not always so easily done. But I think once you've found a new opportunity, maintain that relationship with the person who put you in that position, with that agency, with that recruiter. And it's a tricky one, isn't it? It's difficult to get the right balance sometimes.
And there are different levels, don't forget, of LinkedIn. There's, paid for, there are different options. And I think it's certainly worth subscribing to a paid for option where you can create relationships behind the scenes using the in-mails and the credits that are available. So you're not necessarily exposed by daily, connections that other people can see.
Yes, that's a good point, actually, isn't it? And again, it's about using LinkedIn as a networking tool as much as a hire me flag draped all over your profile.
Yes, yeah. And I think people often see LinkedIn just as a tool for recruiters. And of course it is, but it's also, as you say, a really, really valuable networking tool. And one of the things I always advise my candidates, especially at a certain level of seniority, is first of all to get their LinkedIn profile up to date, and second of all to use it to network with as many people as they can, because the likelihood at their level of finding a job through someone they know or they have already worked with is really, really high.
Yes, and absolutely. And that's definitely one of the things we're covering in the LinkedIn challenge, is how to use it for networking, not just for job hunting, because you never know when you might need your network. And I think it's so important to maintain that network every week, actually. It's not just something you just pop into once a year. It's something I think I encourage my clients to maintain it on a consistently on a regular basis.
Yes. And another point I'd really like to make is, and this is, I think, a bugbear that seems to be doing the rounds on LinkedIn anyway, is that I often get asked, like you may do too, nearly every day I have people that reach out to want to connect with me. And I'm really careful, I'm going to use that word, about who I connect with. But the one thing that I think is really important, and this is just a general piece of advice, if you want to connect with someone, tell them why, or follow it up. So if you invite someone to connect, fine, but then maybe follow it up and say, this was the reason why. Because otherwise it just becomes a really useless networking tool. And I think if there's one thing I'd like to see changed, is to see how people make sure that people use it much more considerately and with reason.
Yes,
It's not just about growing a network.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the same as if you're networking in a face-to-face environment. You wouldn't just walk up to the person and shove your business card into your hand and then walk off. You'd say, oh, hello, I'm I work in the same industry as you, or I've got some similar experience. Maybe we could share ideas and knowledge. So, but otherwise, just sending out a connections request without any follow-up. And sometimes it's obvious because you met each other at a networking event, or you've I don't know. But even then, I think you're so right, is to give that reason for the connection. Otherwise, you tend to just, I know I certainly ignore. If people don't give me a reason and I don't see an immediate connection between the two of us, I don't connect with the person.
No, same.
Excellent. Well, lovely. Amanda, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really helpful.
Pleasure.
And hopefully everybody on the 10-day challenge, you'll see that it's not just me that bangs on about the importance of using LinkedIn as a networking tool and not just for job hunting. And Amanda's covered lots of lovely tips here, and we're going to cover a lot of those in more detail on each day of the challenge. So thank you, Amanda. It's been lovely to talk to you today.
Thank you, Sherry.